whether or not actions, words by some of your colleagues may have contributed to the racism that England's footballers experience. I mean, do you agree with your colleague Steve Baker when he says, much as we can't be associated with calls to defund the police, we urgently need to challenge our own attitude to people taking the knee? Do you agree with him?
I think it's really simple. I mean, racism is abhorrent. We never want to see it in society. We want to make sure that it is, kicked out, recognised in all of its forms. And, I thought our England players clearly did a brilliant job. And I think, we should always cheer them. I would take issue with anybody who says that we shouldn't do everything possible to get rid of racism, and that's exactly what's happened. I thought that the comments about Priti Patel were unusual or odd because Priti Patel has spoken very movingly in the House of Commons about her own experience suffering from racism.
Indeed, she also referred to taking the knee as gesture politics. She also referred to taking the knee as gesture politics, a view which plenty of people in the public took and shared. And now you've got Steve Baker suggesting that you need to challenge the attitude within the party to taking the knee. Again, I'll ask the question, do you agree with Steve Baker that perhaps, calling it gesture politics wasn't the right thing to do?
Well, my views is very simple. I just think we should respect everybody and in whatever form they want to show that they are against racism is fine with me. And I think, actually, it's a shame because this is detracted from a phenomenal performance by the England team, who really got together and did England proud, and that's where I prefer to leave it. I mean, I think we should work all of us together in society and start by accepting that nobody wants to see racism. And if you accept everybody is coming from the right approach and attitude in this, then we'll get a lot further as a country and actually kicking out racism.
Can we at least get you to agree that perhaps we're past the point now where politicians need to stop telling footballers to stop commenting on politics?
Well, look, everyone, the great thing about living in a democracy is everybody is welcome to pitch in on this. I suppose a bit like everybody became armchair experts about what Gareth Southgate should do with his team over the match. I've got no
I think the comparison there is slightly askew, isn't it? I mean, politicians footballers making statements about food banks and racism is slightly different from armchair managers commenting on the England team selection.
You're asking my attitude towards it. They're welcome to. I mean, we live in a free society. People should be able to comment on whatever they like. And I pay tribute to some of the campaigns which have raised awareness. And we live in a world where it doesn't matter if you're a footballer, a politician, a member of the public, everybody has a right to comment on politics. Thank goodness that's the world we live in.
Well, what would your advice then be to your colleague Andrew Rossendale, who did say, perhaps in response to Tyrone Ming's comment yesterday, that he should be focusing on football rather than politics?
Well, as I say, I think everybody can comment on politics. That's the whole spirit of a democracy, isn't it? I think it's the whole point of it. But what I would also say is, we are absolutely united as a government, and I hope as a country as well, booting out racism. We abhor it. In fact, as a cabinet, we're more ethnically diverse, I think, than any in history, as far as I can see. So I think we're more representative of the country in that regard, and so it's a good thing. And I hope we can move on rather united on this issue, because who wants to live in a racist country? Not me.
If there was that meeting with the tech giants, between the Prime Minister and the tech giants yesterday, look, Instagram still seems to view monkey emojis, telling people to go home as not racist. What concrete action is the government going to be taking about this as regards to the social media companies?
Yeah, I mean, of course it's racist to post or allow those sort of things to stay online. We're introducing the online harms bill, and that's going to have a maximum fine of 10% of an organisation's global turnover. So this is a huge potential fine. I know the Prime Minister had the social media companies in yesterday and was very clear with them. They are very bright companies. They're brilliant at producing algorithms and tech and doing remarkable things. They need to be monitoring their networks a heck of a lot more clearly to make sure that they're dealing with this racist abuse, which, as I say, the online harms bill will cost them dearly if they don't.
Do take us through the plans. I mean, you heard Hannah Thomas-Peter there in a report pointing out the fact that some are suggesting that what it amounts to are a series of significant gambles on the part of the government. I suspect you disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge. There's no doubt about that at all. And I know that the transport decarbonisation plan, something that sounds a bit dull, but actually this is the most far-reaching, profound changes we will have ever seen to our transport network. And it's a plan which is more ambitious than anything that's been set out by any major economy in the world. What I'd say is, I think that by getting there first, by doing these, making these decisions, setting the path now, we can give ourselves an example for the future. And we've already been doing that by, for example, saying that there'd be an end to sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2030 and completely by 2035, even the hybrids. And in doing so, we've ended up, seeing those big announcements about jobs in Ellesmere Port for Vauxhall and in Sunderland for Nissan in the last week or so, building gigafactories, bringing the green jobs to the UK. So I think there's a big advantage to sort of getting out there first and setting out in considerable detail, which is what this plan does today.
It is perhaps, though, Minister, the reason that no one else has gone as far as this government is because a lot of what you're talking about is as yet impossible. I mean, you heard the Road Haulage Association in Hannah's report pointing out the fact you want to move away from diesel and petrol HGVs. The problem is, of course, we don't have any alternatives to diesel or petrol HGVs currently.
Yes, I should point out that the bigger of the logistics organisations, Logistics UK, who also deal with the haulier sector, says that the plan provides confidence and clarity. I think actually it is true to say that not all the technology is there at the moment. But if you look at the total CO2, carbon produced by transport in 2019, 90% of it came from the roads and 70% of that came from cars and vans. And the cars and vans part of it, the technology is already there. Lots of people already drive electric vehicles. 1 in 7 cars sold this year had a plug on the end of it, essentially. So, we've already got large parts of the technology. Undeniably, we need the technology for the rest, and we're investing in lots of different research to make sure that we can have sort of carbon-free travel for the HGVs, for coaches, for lorries, for buses, and then for other forms of transport, including maritime, including aviation, where the work is actually already very much advanced.
Sure, but wouldn't it also be advantageous to take advantage of the powers that are within your grasp at the moment, sorting out, for example, the fact that currently, train trips are still 50% more expensive than flying on the same route. We know that local authorities, in terms of investment in local bus services, we've seen that diminish over the past few years. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can do to get people out of their cars, out of petrol guzzlers and onto public transport, but we don't seem so keen.
There's lots of things we can do, but we're massively keen. I must have missed you that morning, but I came on the programme on Sky and announced the Bus Back Better, which is our plan for buses. It's a £3 billion bus plan, which does exactly what you've just said, which is to get people onto the bus network. Just a few weeks ago, I launched Great British Railways as a concept which will bring our railways together and enable much better, clearer transport for people, more efficiently run trains, more on time, and so on and so forth. So I agree entirely. These other forms of transport, and public transport in particular, need to be really attractive so we can get people onto those forms of transport. And we've already made some very big, very significant announcements in that area. This transport decarbonisation plan today is, first of all, a large document, as you might expect,
yeah,
which talks about all of the different aspects, but it's also then supported by 9 different technical documents and consultations into all areas of transport, with the idea that we become the fastest decarbonising transport economy in the world, with all the jobs that can provide, as we've seen in Ellesmere Port and in Sunderland just in the last week or so.
Morning. So tell us about this. So the government is launching this groundbreaking transport decarbonisation plan. Sounds like an opportunity to get rid of our lovely petrol cars and tax us more, but perhaps you've got more positive news on it.
I said the transport decarbonisation plan sounds a bit dull, but it's actually very profound. These changes are huge and very important. We know that we need to deal with global warming. We need to get the carbon out of transport to do that. But actually, what this plan is not about is telling people what they can't do. It's actually about finding the technology to do it better and to enable people to carry on either, moving around, whether that's through driving or other forms of transport, and flying as well. So it's a really positive plan. We do need to set it out. We want to get ahead. We're using our advantages of being outside the European regulatory framework to steal a march, and in doing so bring the green technology jobs here, which we saw at Ellesmere Port and up in Sunderland with Vauxhall and Nissan last week. And that's what this is all about, making sure we get ahead of the world on this and exporting it to the world.
You really have to talk about the infrastructure, and I've seen very little about government infrastructure plans until or unless we have the proper infrastructure in place that people can charge outside their homes and it's reasonably charged and costed. Until we've got a better way of charging for electricity, which is apparently green, but it's still very expensive, and until we've got a better way to make sure that we're really reusing these things and providing a sort of an on-sale market for cars and making sure that we're using our technology properly, this is not really joined up thinking. What are you doing about trying to get that infrastructure in place?
Well, first of all, I'm massively impressed you've been driving an electric car for 12 years. I didn't know that was even possible. But 1 in 7 cars being sold this year have a plug on the end of them. And we've seen a massive expansion in the number of electric charging locations. In fact, there are now more electric charging locations than petrol stations in the UK. So
but that's not outside people's homes.
So, well, first of all, there are 25,000 in total across the country, of which 4,500 are these rapid chargers. 2/3 of homes in this country have garages and driveways. So what we're really talking about is what you do about the third which don't. And we're seeing a big government investment. You asked about the money involved. Billions is the answer in getting street furniture upgraded. For example, street lamps with charging points in them, and even investing in, we're doing experiments at the moment with road charging. So you know how you can charge your phone through wireless charging. We're even doing experiments right now on how to do that with cars as well. I don't disagree with you that, of course, there is some way to go. But having said that, we are seeing this huge expansion in the amount of electric charging available. And we understand, for example, that when blocks of flats are being built, refitted, places of work, all of those places, and we're legislating for this, need electric charging. We're making sure that happens too.
Though, about this delivery culture that we now have, and shouldn't we really be saying to the delivery companies and to the Ubers and the like, that if you want to operate in our cities, you are going to have to go fully electric. It's no good having hybrid. It's no good having diesel cars because they're cheaper to run or whatever it may be. You have to go fully electric, and in fact, they should be forced to do it first. Yeah. It strikes me as bonkers that we've got all deliveries. We've seen through the pandemic, we've got deliveries taking place to people left, right and centre with throwing away more plastic and cardboard than ever before because it's being delivered to our houses. We can't be bothered to go and pick up something from a shop. We're killing off our high street. We've killed off our high street because we don't reform the tax in terms of the rates. And then we still encourage people to be delivered either personally or their stuff by things that are bilging out all these fumes. It's bonkers.
Yeah. No, look, I do agree. And actually, in as little as 8.5 years' time, all cars and vans, so it will include most of those deliveries, must no longer be pure petrol and diesel, and by 2035 only electric. And I do want to, sort of a shout out to those who I see getting on with the job. When I see Amazon delivering to my home at the moment, they're coming in a 100% quite large electric van.
That's because they know that you're the minister in charge. They don't do that with me.
They're doing it especially for me.
I think they are. But let me just ask you, because we've got 30 million cars on our road, though. And
I was going to say a couple of others like UPS, where I'm starting to see, the green number plate shows that it's a all electric, zero carbon. The UPS vehicles, which are starting to do that. So I'm seeing some of the big brands switch their fleet over. Most of them have ambitious plans to become zero carbon, even ahead of the national plans to do so. So look, I've been impressed by their response, and others. British Gas are doing the same thing. I think we're on the right track here.
The great train fare robbery. How on earth are we going to persuade people back to your green revolution, and how are we going to, persuade people to get onto trains when they're more expensive than planes? How are we going to decarbonise when we make travelling around very difficult and put roadblocks in their way? That we've made, for example, train travel is very, very expensive compared to comparable planes. Unless and until you kind of get on board and make it cheaper, people are just not going to use it, are they?
Well, look, I absolutely do want to encourage people back to the railways as we open up again. And we were seeing, by the way, the evidence before this coronavirus started was 2019, the last full year. We saw record numbers of people take the train. Literally, the record all-time number of people in the last quarter before coronavirus. So I want to get us back there. Of course, we've got to balance what the taxpayer pays towards our railways and what people who actually use them are paying towards them. And I don't think anyone can accuse the government of having been stingy in this regard. We've spent about 10 billion pounds supporting our railways through this crisis and kept them running. And we, as ever, you've got to sort of weigh up the finances and make sure that people who perhaps only ever cycle or drive for whatever reason, never use the railways, aren't paying for everyone else's trips. So there's always a balance on these things. But I want to get our railways back up and running. I announced the Great British Railways reforms to our railways in the last couple of months. That's going to be very exciting and change our railways forever and make them run better. And
well, Sadiq Khan, Transport for London, announcing this morning that the wearing of masks will remain mandatory on the tube and on bus networks in London. What do you make of that? I suppose you must disagree with it.
No, I was on either your programme or Sky just at the end of the last week saying that whilst we're going from this being a legal requirement to guidelines, we do expect individual carriers, the transport organisations, to make sure that they are putting in place whatever's appropriate for their network.
But why would it be appropriate to wear a mask on a bus in London but not to wear a mask on a train leaving London?
So sure. So if you think about it, the airlines, for example, have already said, without any fuss, as far as I saw, that you'll need to carry on wearing masks on those. I said last week it will be a condition of carriage for various different transport organisations, of which TfL, which tend to have crowded commuter trains, may well, I actually said this, they may well want to have it as a condition of carriage. So it's very much in line with what we expected, even wanted to happen. On the other hand, if you're on a long distance train, you're the only person in a carriage, it's late in the evening or something, there's clearly no real point in wearing a mask. We didn't want to say that you're breaking the law by not wearing a mask in a situation where there's absolutely no advantage in wearing that mask. So this is very much what we expected, anticipated and said should and would happen.
So if you travel on an empty bus to come into Skye in the morning, I should be able to get on that bus without wearing a mask?
So it depends on what that transport organisation says. So if in
Transport for London, they're saying I should wear that mask. So should I wear it?
Yes,
should I not wear it?
If the conditions of carriage to get on that bus are you must have a mask on, then of course you must wear a mask. It's pretty straightforward. But there's no point.
It's pretty straightforward. It's also fairly inconsistent, though, isn't it, Minister?
Well, we are moving away from everything is set in law. I know we've got very used to it the last year and a half, to a situation where we say, you now take either responsibility personally, or in this case, you'll be told by the organisation that you are stepping into or stepping onto in this case. But there may be other occasions where people are asked to wear masks because they're being in a confined area. And that's quite right. That's the point of the fourth stage of the unlock, which takes place next Monday. And it will mean that responsibility starts to return to people and to organisations, which is absolutely right, because we are going through that unlock stage very cautiously.
Sadiq Khan has said keeping masks as a condition of travel on the most of the city's transport network here in London would reassure passengers. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is, along with your health ministers, announcing, if you like, a bonfire of all the regulations on the 19th of July. I'm confused. Should I wear a face covering or not on public transport?
Yeah, no need to be confused at all. And actually, when I announced the changes from a transport point of view, which come into place on Monday as we go through the fourth stage of the unlock, I said at the time that some carriers will make it a condition of carriage that you'll still be required to wear a face covering. And that's absolutely right. We invited TfL and others to say if they wanted to do that. We've seen airlines require face coverings. We've seen TfL come forward and say they'll do the same. But if you happen to be on a long distance train and you're the only person in the carriage, it's clearly bonkers to make it against the law to remove your face covering. So we're moving to a more permissive part of the unlock now on Monday, but absolutely right that some carriers will require you to wear face coverings. It's what we would expect to happen, indeed what we asked to happen.
UK travellers with the Indian AstraZeneca vaccine barred from holidays is the headline from the Telegraph. 4120Z001 is one of the batches. That's what's on my NHS app. That means that as a result of, is it incompetence? Is it disagreements with Europe? Is it their intransigence? What is it that to some European countries, my vaccine doesn't mean anything? I haven't got a passport at all.
I'm only aware that Malta have made this move, and as you can imagine, we'll be in touch with our Maltese colleagues today. I think it's born out of some misunderstanding. If I explain, these are vaccines which happen to be manufactured by the Serum Institute in India, as are many medicines. They happen to manufacture two different branded vaccines. One's called Vaxzevria and another one called Covishield. Now, our medicines agency, the MHRA, recognise and regulate the one which is called Vaxzevria and not Covishield. I think that there may be some misunderstanding in the
because
Maltese
according to the reports in the press, that there are some countries, you're absolutely right, who are recognising, but there are also others like France who say, yeah, you can come in with your vaccines, but they're not recognised, and you will have to have a full PCR test. So if that's the case, that means that up to 5 million people in the UK are going to be severely disrupted by this unless the government takes some pretty urgent action.
Well, as I say, it's only that situation in France has nothing to do with a specific type of vaccine. That's the same as we require them to take PCR tests when they visit here. So there's no that's a slightly different situation. It's only Malta that I'm aware of, and as I say, I think that they have slightly misunderstood that these vaccines are WHO approved. They're approved by the medicine regulator. Obviously, we don't want people to be disadvantaged at all. They shouldn't be. And of course, I'll be on to my Maltese equivalents today in order to ensure that everyone has understood that these are fully, properly regulated vaccines, which are every bit as good as those manufactured in the UK and elsewhere.
I mean, is it fair to describe our airport and border security as a total shambles?
No, are you talking about because of coronavirus and what we're going to need to do to help bring people?
It was bad enough before we started, but every time I've seen people who have, either for business or otherwise, come through our borders, they say that they are being kept and held for hours on end, that the checks seem to be ridiculous, there are not enough staff in place, and that we are over a year into this, and you would have thought that we would have proper test tracing systems in place. We just don't, and it's shambolic. It's embarrassing.
Well, Look, I don't entirely agree with your analysis there.
How long is reasonable then to wait? When you get to the border, you're coming in. How long is reasonable to wait?
First of all, I think most people understand we're experiencing a global pandemic, and therefore there are necessary checks which have meant that the border force team have had to check 100% of people coming into this country to make sure they'd had a pre-departure test, to make sure they've got their testing booked. And I think it would be letting people down to not do that. And obviously, that process takes some time. So I think, first of all, some patience is required in that process. It's not you can't magically resolve that. Having said that, what we have been doing is hugely investing in technology, both physical upgrades to the e-gates, for example, and software upgrades, which means that when they look at your passport, they're able to look at what's called the passenger locator form, which people have to fill in before they come here. And when they do that, they're able to automatically send people through. So yes, you're right, there have been reports of and genuinely issues with queues. There have also been people who've been contacting me and saying, remarkable, got through in 20 or 30 minutes. I was expecting a long queue. From Monday, this changes again. And I expect that with regard to the people who are double vaccinated, and therefore we see more travel, that some of those queues may occur when you check into the airport or port from the place that you're leaving. So I do want to warn people, we could expect additional queues, we will expect additional queues, but I don't accept that, oh, this is just a nonsense and it shouldn't be happening. We are expecting both the airlines and our border force to check a whole bunch of things that a year and a half ago we never even knew about, and it would be irresponsible not to check them properly.